Hi everyone, this is Alex versus Vinura, played on the 23rd of February. Let's get into it. So d4, d5, so knight c6, what? I mean, this is a d-pawn opening. This is very common. I'm just going to quickly talk about this. With e4, it's perfectly fine to play this sort of four-knight stuff, right? And what's happening, I've noticed a lot, is that juniors, particularly inexperienced players, don't seem to know the difference between an e-pawn opening and a d-pawn opening. When the pawn's on d4, you can't just play the same four-knight stuff. It's not very good. Your knight doesn't want to be here. You actually want this pawn here, and the same goes for black. So the knight does not want to be on c6 because it gets in the way of the c-pawn. C-pawn either wants to go to c6 to defend d5 or c5 to attack the center and let the queen out. Now you don't want to do the same sort of thing in an e-pawn opening because you don't want to go for f5 sort of stuff. You're just weakening your king. And this is a major problem. This is something I need all young players I'm trying to teach to understand. There's a big difference between d4 openings and e4 openings. And so this is something I'm not happy to see is this knight c6 move. The knight really prefers to be on d7 in a d-pawn opening because from d7 it controls e5 and it controls c5. Now there are some systems, like the Chigorin defense for instance, where the knight does go to this square here. But in this situation, in this particular position, knight c6, I consider it a positional blunder. I think the knight is just misplaced here. And we'll see what happens in the game. So I mean, it's not a blunder, but it's not a very well placed knight. You should just be developing your king side as fast as you can. Knight f6, e6, bishop out, get yourself castled, and then you'll find you want your knight sitting here anyway. Particularly when you've got a pawn here, having knights on e4 is good. The pawn guards the e4 square and supports a piece jumping onto e4, and it's great to have another knight that can jump in behind and back up your knight on e4. Okay, so I won't talk any more about the opening after that. e6, yeah, knight c3. So white's doing the right thing. Alex has got a great setup here. He's got plenty of pressure on the center, and he hasn't gone to put his knight in front of his c-pawn, and his queen can jump out, harass this pawn, and harass the center at the same time. Black does not have that option, and this knight's just out of play. Bishop b4. That's okay. I mean, they're a bishop b4 line, so I really like this bishop. Your dark squared bishop's very powerful. You've got all your pawns on white squares, so you've got to cherish your dark squared bishop. Your light squared bishop is garbage, so if you can find a way to swap that off, great. But this pin, generally, you don't want to take this. So here, yeah, bishop f4. White's just getting his bishop outside the pawn chain before he closes up. This is just great stuff by white. Now black has played this move here and just chomped on that knight, trading off his good bishop for that knight. Now it does take a lot of the pressure off the center, that's true, but it gives white an open b file that he can use, making it even harder to develop this bishop. And yeah, this bishop's gone now, which means yeah, these dark squares could become a problem, and this bishop can't really be challenged. This bishop's going to be very powerful for a very long time. Yeah, I mean, maybe the reason he did this is he was worried about the knight jumping to here and tactics on this pawn here, but there's no reason to take. You might as well wait for white to waste a move playing a3, and then you take. By bringing the bishop out and then trading it for the knight, you're kind of just throwing away a move. Wait for white to waste a move, then grab the knight. h6. What? Yeah, another pawn move. I don't really I can't say I agree with playing moves like this unless you're specifically trying to keep pieces out of g5. Now you don't have to worry about a knight jumping to g5. It doesn't do anything except take the knight away from from a good square and putting it on a worse square. h6 is just a wasted move. Instead, black should be developing, getting his knight out, getting ready to castle. So h6, e3, yep, good stuff. Knight f6, bishop d3. So black here has waited for the bishop to develop and then taken this pawn. However, he's given up his center pawn. It's probably better just to leave this pawn here and be happy with the fact that you've got a pawn in the center acting as an anchor, protecting this square here so the knight can maybe jump in. And it just gives you real estate in the center. By trading this off, you just thrown away the center. Now white has several different plans available to him. He could move this bishop out of the way and go for c4 and d5 in the middle, or he can get rooks behind this e-pawn and maybe charge this e-pawn up the board. White's position's looking amazing. Black is starting to look a little bit cramped, and this bishop is pretty terrible, particularly with a million white pieces guarding the e5 square. This pawn's never moving, which means this bishop's never coming out. Knight e4 was played. I think it wastes the move. I think just castling is better here. Knight into e4, that just allows, you just defend this pawn with either the rook, which probably doesn't want to be played because the rook wants to be on b1. But what white did I thought was great, just queen c2. Attacks the knight, defends the pawn at the same time. Now black's played f5. Oh, all these holes in the king side here. And this bishop's now even worse, because now there's two pawns blocking it. And this e-pawn is going to be very frustrating to have to deal with. Obviously, that's not a problem now, but yeah, keeping this defended is going to be quite tricky, particularly if this knight were to jump into here and then f3 gets played and then e4 gets played after a swap off in the middle. This pawn just gets weaker and weaker. The other horrible thing about f5 is it does create this giant hole in the center of the board, just creating an outpost for for white to use. And once a knight gets here and trades off for this knight, this bishop's going to sit here forever. And it's going to take black a very long time to maneuver his knight around to try and challenge that bishop. So after f5, white's got a fantastic position. The hole on e5, better control of the center, and some holes to aim for. The only thing that f5 has that's advantageous is it does actually control the center square and back up this knight here, and maybe there's a potential to play g5 and trying to go on some sort of pawn storm on the king side. I can't see any pawn storm on the king side being successful though, because white's always got this d5 push, just opening up the center whenever he wants. And if these pawns march up the board, the moment this center opens up, they're all just going to look incredibly weak, and this king is never ever finding a safe square to go. So yeah, here just castle. Can't castle. Your knight's in trouble. You might have to just move the knight back and accept the fact that your last move was a mistake. Moving the knight in here in the first place was a mistake. Just castling is the way to go. Maybe trying to get rid of this bishop since it's unchallenged is also an option. Something like knight h5 and just trying to trade off for this bishop. And the idea is to answer bishop f5 by playing f6. Okay, let's get further in. Castles, yeah, that's good. White's just doing really well here. Knight f6. Rook ab1, yeah, rook on the half-open file stops the bishop from developing. This is great stuff, and if this pawn gets pushed, then these light squares are going to just be incredibly weak. Things like bishop b5 pinning the knight can be a pain, followed by the pawn charging up and another pawn charging up, and white can just win this any way he wants. So knight h5 was played, trying to get rid of that bishop. Black didn't care. Black just went rook e1, and this is one of the great things, one of the bad things. Another bad thing about the pawn being on f5 is that black can't just take this bishop, because after it takes back, this is now a backward pawn. It's incredibly weak, being attacked twice as a backward pawn on a half-open file, pointing straight at the king, and this pawn is doomed. It's just it's in a lot of trouble. Moves like d5 start to become possible now with pins and problems on this pawn. For example, if the queen were to try and protect this pawn like this, you've got moves like this. As it turns out, you've also got ideas like this because the bishop is overworked. It's trying to defend the b7 pawn and the e6 pawn. So after it takes here, you've got rook here check and forking the king and the queen. And this king's not castling; it's trapped in the center, and all these pawns are falling apart. And these pawns are going to start marching up the board through the middle as well. Okay, so he didn't take, which is good. He can't. He played queen f6 here, and Yeah, I mean, the engine's loving white's position. 3.5 points up for white. D5 straight away is what the engine loves. Let's just open the position up and stop this king from ever castling. I'm not sure if it's necessary to go to those extremes. You could probably just throw your knight in e5, and that's exactly what white did. Just sit in the hole there, and this is very uncomfortable for black to deal with. The threat is just to take here, doubling these, whoops, doubling the c pawns, and then the bishop's gonna mop up the c7 pawn at the end of it all. And once again, black doesn't want to take and yeah, and release the rook onto his e6 pawn. I have no idea how black gets out of it. Can possibly get out of this this mess of a position. He tried g5 with the pawn storm idea, but that's just answered by. There's a few different ways to answer this. Just trading knights is looks really good to me. You just take the knight and then you're threatening bishop e5. So your opponent has to do something like this, and then the knight can just jump back here, and this knight is just immortal. It's just incredible. How does black ever get rid of it? Some sort of ridiculous knight maneuver is required to actually get rid of that knight. Knight here to there to there to there, which means moving the king and the queen. You know, this knight's going to be here for a very long time. Instead, white chose queen e2, basically saying you take me, I'll take you with check. I really think he should have just taken, just ripped that knight off. It's just he just looks very, very strong for white. Yeah, it likes queen d1 as well. So the engine likes the idea of harassing this knight. It just doesn't like putting it on e2. And the main reason is because this knight can take the bishop, hitting the queen, which doesn't give you time to grab this. And after you take here, he can grab this, and it allows black to to trade the queens off. And rook takes e5. Black can maybe do something like this. He's going to end up with isolated double pawns at the end of it all. I mean, he could take like this, but I think that's just equal now. I think the blocking the rook line off is not so good. That's why the engine is suggesting queen d1, because then if knight takes on f4, the rook is still here, and there's no queen swap off. So after takes here, knight takes here, you take back with a rook, and the queens stay on the board. And white wants the queens to stay on the board because this king is just terrible. It's stuck in the center. If it castles on the king side, it's wide open, asking for trouble. You can't really develop to castle at queen side because this b7 pawn is being attacked. White does not want to swap queens off, and playing queen e2 does give black that option of knight f4. Lucky for white, he didn't see it. He actually retreated his knight back to g7. Now white's just easily winning. So I think this is an accuracy. I think it's the only inaccuracy white played for the entire game was queen e2. The idea was great, just needed to go to d1, just so the queens don't get swapped off. I mean, even after all this, white's still winning. Even after the queen swap off, it's pretty awesome for white here. After takes, you can just grab this if you want to. There's probably no rush to take it, but if you do, yeah, it's still very, very strong for white. You can play rook f6 now, harassing these pawns, and this is on pre, and that's on pre. White's going to win something and be in a one position at the end of it all. The fact that it's a rook ending means that it might be a bit harder to win than white would probably like. I think queen d1 would have just been better. Okay, so knight g7 was played, and yeah, it's pretty much all over. White's just won a pawn now. He just takes this. If black takes a knight back, then this bishop grabs a c7 pawn. But if black grabs this, then this knight can just run away to like here and threaten to win this pawn. And yeah, I mean, black can try and complicate things, but yeah, just queen here. This pawn is under so much pressure, and a maneuver like knight here to there, for instance, is very, very strong. And just the threat of taking this pawn is just so hard to stop. What does he do? b6? I mean, that just creates weaknesses galore. I mean, things like queen f3 now, just threatening to grab the rook is very strong. And then the queen, jumping into c6 might be a problem. For example, you do here, and you might have queen c6 with the idea of the queen grabbing this. According to the engine, it's not as good as some other things. The engine loves d5, and you can understand why the engine loves d5. It's just this king is in so much trouble. This pawn can't even take this knight because it's pinned to the rook. Just a very, very strong position for white. Okay, but he didn't play g takes f4. He took this back, and this is just, yeah, a pawn up for white. He owns the b file. This pawn is really weak. This pawn is isolated. That pawn is isolated. e4 is coming very soon. White might want to play f4 first before playing e4, because you don't want black to be able to answer e4 with f4, keeping the position blocked. Let's see what happened. Bishop d7. h3 was played. Maybe this is just white being careful and creating escape square for his king before his rooks venture off. I'm not sure it's necessary. I think you can probably play a move like bishop d6 here, which just stops black from castling completely and traps the king in the center for the rest of the game. Yeah, I mean, bishop e5 is also very strong. That bishop's just insanely good. Just a move like e4 just appeals to me as a great option here as well. I mean, it's just the threat of just being able to take and then come rushing through. And if your opponent answers with f4 here, which you probably should do, you've still got bishop e5. Is f4 a possibility, maybe? It might be. He's going to castle, though, which is a bit uncomfortable. That's why I like this idea of bishop d6 first. Just stop him from castling. These dark squares are just murdering poor black. The king is never getting out of the center. Maybe he has to do a run for it. King f7, king g6, or something like that. But yeah, f4 and e4 are coming pretty soon. Okay, so he played h3. King e7 was played. What about king f7? Or is that bad for some reason? I mean, it's just running into this pin, obviously. If you go king e7, though, you have to worry about this pin here. If bishop a5 was played, it looks like the idea is to put the bishop onto b4. I'm sure there are more clear-cut ways to gain advantage here, though. Like bishop e5, hitting the queen, forces the queen back here, and then then the rook jumping down to b7, pinning the bishop to the king it's just so uncomfortable. And you got the other rook coming in behind. It's just so good for white. So he played bishop a5, and then bishop e8 was played. Looks like the bishop's trying to get some activity out onto h5. There's a major problem though, and this rook check might be just devastating. I mean, where does the king go? It has to go to f8, I think. Well, the bishop has to drop back in the way, and yeah, then maybe now e4. Although it's still answered by f4. So I like this idea of trying to play f4 first, and then getting e4 in, because by doing it this way, your opponent can't push past you. So even if he takes like this, you can still do e4. And you're guaranteed to be able to swap these pawns off and get at this pawn. Either he takes you and you take back, and you've got a million pieces hitting e6, or he doesn't take you, you just take him, and your queen gets to infiltrate deep into his position. Okay, so bishop b4. So back here, he played bishop b4 check, king f7, and then threw the bishop into c5. It's just outposts everywhere for this bishop. These bishops are amazing. They just control so much. At some point, white is going to have to try and open up the center, though. Can't give black too much time, because black might be able to organize a defense. It's going to take black a very large number of moves, but you shouldn't dilly-dally. The king went to g6. e4 needs to be answered by f4. This has to be done. Although, things like e5 might be a problem. Maybe not. Maybe that just lets the knight jump into f5 later on. Yeah, I mean, I'm still liking this whole idea of f4. to just keep the position, keep the pawn blocked on f5 so you can play e4. We'll see what happened. Black did not play f4, which is absolutely essential. Do not let your opponent open the position up when he's got two bishops and there are weak pawns everywhere and holes everywhere and an exposed king. You cannot let the position open up. He did, though. He threw his knight into h5, and that just loses straight away. Just takes. Queen takes. Whoa, that's terrible. It just loses the queen. It has to be e takes. It's the only move. And then yeah, the rook comes to b7, and then you're threatening. Yeah, I mean, you're threatening things like bishop jumping into here, and this queen's almost trapped. It's looking pretty bad for black. The threat of bishop e7 is devastating. Yeah. In this position, he played queen here, and then it's just a very simple bishop d3. Maybe yeah, this should just win the queen, right? Knight f4 is not a thing. The engine's saying knight f4, but then you just take here, don't you? What am I missing? Why can't we just go bang, won a queen, game over? As it turns out, white didn't play that. White played queen takes e6. Missing the chance to just win a queen. I did say white only made one blunder, where it turns out white made two blunders. When I was PGNing the game, I don't look at the position too carefully. I just race through the moves, and I wasn't thinking too carefully. But yeah, just missing bishop d3, just easy win. According to the engine, bishop takes e6 is even better. Why? That's the question. Why? Why is this even better? Like, what if the queen goes to f4? This check here looks like it's very strong. King goes to f6. And even now, there's no clear win. I mean, rook b7 threatens bishop e7. And is bishop e7 even a threat? I mean, it's not hard to see that black is about to suffer a devastating loss. It's just where's the tactic? Yeah, but I mean, there's no point looking at it. I mean, bishop d3 is just obviously the most clear-cut way to win this game. So white missed that, played queen takes e6, and black didn't take the queen. He has to, doesn't he? He played queen f6, and that just yeah. I mean, surely with such an exposed king, he should be swapping queen. So I'm analyzing this. I'm trying to find a forced win. If I use the engine analysis, it says rook b7 and just letting the swap off of queens. But something like queen e4, getting the queen out of danger, looks more sensible to me. After queen f5, apparently there is a forced mate. After takes, rook e6. Yeah, I mean, g4, of course, check. Just looks like the sensible move here. Winning the knight. The king has to go to g6, and then yeah, then rook b7. This rook b7 move keeps coming up because it stops the king from hiding anywhere. It stops the king from running back. Not that there's really any places to hide. Again, I'm not going to dwell on this too much because this position is easily won for white. White played bishop d3 check. Well, I mean, white's already 2 pawns up with 2 fantastic bishops in an open position and an exposed king to harass. So the king went to g7, and then yeah, rook b7 check. These moves just look strong and sensible and really good to me. Bishop f7 was played, and yeah, what was played here? Queen takes f6. Knight takes f6. Yeah, this is good. Just pinning. Rook h f8 is played to defend that. And I don't know. Can you play bishop c4 here? Oh, it's just a pinned bishop, so piling on the pinned piece just looks like the move. But I know that doesn't really work because the knight jumps into d5. Okay, so what white has done is he's gone and played bishop f5 with the idea of playing the bishop into here, and that way the knight can't block it. That's actually very clever. It does give black a free move, though, to try and unravel his position. So he plays here, hitting the rook. Now, this rook probably should just take here and win a free pawn. You know, pretty much forcing rook back here. And then you can start looking at allowing some swap-offs, and then you just gain an extra pawn. Instead, white played bishop e6 straight away, and it means he doesn't get this a-pawn. I don't think it really matters, to be honest. He's going to get it anyway. The king just got out of the pin. Oh, but hang on, this rook's on pre. Okay, so after rook takes, bishop is going to be hitting this rook here. And there's nothing black can do about it. Takes. He needs to play king g8 probably to just to defend his rook. Oh, he played. But this bishop's going to be on pre. Okay, king g6 is not as bad as I thought. Bishop takes f8. Bishop takes e6. This is white's the exchange up and has a million extra pawns. Well, two. Shouldn't rook takes a7 be played here? That just defends the a pawn from the bishop and just steals a pawn. That looks just very strong. Instead, he played g4. Maybe he's he's trying to checkmate the king in one. Okay, that's sneaky. Go ahead, take my free pawn, mate. Yeah, that's clever. Yeah, just noticing the king, all the escape squares of the king can be taken. So g4, even though it's not the best move, in practice it's actually a decent, really good move. So the knight jumped back to e8. e8. Why is it going back there? Why isn't it jumping into the center at least? Creates an escape square on f6 and harasses the c3 pawn, and you know eyes the f4 square as well. I don't understand why the knight would jump back to e8. That's no good. So the rook just took on a7, and yeah, I can just skim through the rest of these moves pretty quickly. a4, knight f6, a5. Yeah, this is just game over. There's nothing black can do about it. There's no way on earth his pieces can get over there to deal with this pawn. Bishop c8 was played. Bishop e5, knight f6. Just trade the pieces off, hit the bishop. The bishop sacks, and yeah, this is I can just race through these at high speed because it doesn't really matter at this stage. Check, checkmate. Yep. Yeah. So quite well played by white there. So just the two things, the two little errors I think that were made. I think the first error wasn't even an error. The second one was not an error. It was just missing a simple pin, winning the queen. But when you're that much material up, it's easy to just coast through and miss a few tactics like that. Okay, I hope you all learned something from that game, and thanks for listening. See you later.